Hello. I wanted to go over the lunar cycle for the end of November and into December. It's likely that I'll put up a full video for the upcoming full moon in Gemini. That's a rip roar banger full moon that I'm looking forward to. It's going to be on my Venus, which is exciting. Anyway, yeah, so I'm gonna go through it right now and show you what I mean. So, here we are. Hopefully this is visible enough for you. But this is Luna. I use Luna. This is not paid promotion. I've been enjoying using Luna a lot, and part of the reason is because they have this thing where you can click cycles and it'll show you all of the lunation cycles for the like whatever year you want. And so we're at the end of this year, 2025, and we're currently in the Scorpio new moon cycle, which happened a few days ago, November 19th. And we can see here we're just approaching what's called the crescent phase of this lunar cycle, and that's going to be when the moon is approximately 45 degrees from the sun. So let's check and see if that math is right. 2 to 2, so 2 Sag to 2 Capricorn is 30, plus 15 is 45. So that is what we call the crescent, waxing crescent moon, and this is the first light of the new moon. And really, it's a very wonderful time because what's happening is we're starting to really get visibly clear on what we're doing. And what we're doing is whatever happened around the new moon on November 19th. I have a few shorts out about this November 19th seed moment that you can go and think about and track to your own life. But basically, we're starting something again. We're starting something deep and psychological again at this time, probably to do with other people's money, psychic endeavors, spirituality, sex, something like this. That's Scorpio. Okay, so here we are. It's almost going to be this crescent moon because today I'm filming on November 23rd. I will go through the rest of the cycle here. But what's happening is we have the crescent moon happening in the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn's all about our work and the work that we're here to do, the foundation that we're trying to build in this life. And trying is the wrong word. It is simply the foundation that we already are standing on. And I think I'm personally moving away from a lot of interpretive astrology that relies on this idea of education or relies on the idea of lessons, right? Life being all about these lessons that we have to learn. I'm sick of it, to be honest. It's a lovely and beautiful metaphoric way to describe life, which I think will always work. However, I'm shifting my gears because I think we know a lot more than we gives ourselves credit for. I think that most things are a choice and that the work that we're here to do is about recognizing the foundation that we already have and allowing ourselves to express it instead of doing work in the old school Capricorn way of trading your blood, sweat, and tears, breaking your bones to be able to stand on something that ultimately won't even be able to hold you in 30 years' time. Okay, so that's what I think. This is basically an interesting time in the cycle because these next few days it'll be at the first quarter square, which is a choice point that we're making. You can see 6 degrees of Sagittarius is 90 degrees away from Pisces. That 90 degrees is the first quarter waxing square of the lunar cycle. And we can see by this point, Saturn has gone direct in the sky. And this is a pretty big deal. It's a big deal anytime Saturn moves direct in the sky. And that's because, you know, Saturn is that ruler of Capricorn. Saturn is the ruler of the work that we do. And it really depends on how we are psychologically interfacing with that work, how we are interfacing with the social zeitgeist that we live in, the laws, the country, the land, and any like internal repression, any internal judgment, anything that is keeping us from self-expression, essentially, that is creating black and white and every color in between. Saturn is reality itself. So when Saturn is retrograde, which it has been since around July of this year, if I'm not wrong, Saturn appears to be moving backwards in the sky. And so we're really, really rethinking. We are moving inside of ourselves when it comes to the work that we are doing, the boundaries that we hold. And when it shifts direction in the sky, that's when we can finally go and like walk our boundaries, like walk our truth. And that doesn't mean we're holding up more boundaries. It means we know what's our lane. And that doesn't mean like stay in your lane as a comfort zone. It means like you know where you begin and you end. And that means you know what all of your possibilities are. That's all that Saturn does. And it's moving direct in Pisces. And so this is all about our spiritual self-authority. Very expanded sense of self-authority at this point, but it's going direct really in the same moment as we have this first quarter square between the moon also in the sign of Pisces. And so we're having to make this decision to step out. A first quarter square moon is about stepping out into this lunar cycle. It's the first time we might announce to the world in a much more public sense with something at stake. We're going to announce our dream. And I think we're going to know what that is because Saturn's direct. You know, we know the steps we need to take. We know what we have to express in terms of truly where we begin and we end. And that's going to be very weird and strange in Pisces, but Saturn's been in Pisces for a really long time now, so we're much more used to it. This is essentially where we are beginning and ending in a creative sense, in a spiritual sense, in a sense of our dream and what is the truth for us personally, individually. We've been having quite an interesting time with that definition of truth because Saturn has been so close to Neptune in the sky, which is actually the ruler of the sign of Pisces. Neptune is the planet of the truth. It's the planet of the capital T truth, which is ultimately unknowable, mystical. Can't put your finger on it because it's everywhere and it's nowhere and it's beyond anything you could ever know, and yet also fully inclusive of everything you already do know. So, how does, right, when you merge that with where you begin, where you end, and your boundaries, it gets a little confusing. So we've been coming out of a very confusing time of like, are we moving forward this way from this perspective, or should we shut it down? And I think because Saturn's moving forward now, we're no longer as confused about what our personal truth is. And I think it's because we've had a taste of Saturn and Neptune. They both went into Aries for a moment over the summer. And that was a point where we could actually just choose and say, yeah, this is our truth. This is what's going on. But now that they're both back in Pisces and Saturn's going direct, so Saturn's really on its way out. Neptune's going to be direct in a few weeks. It's going to be on its way out. They're both going to be out by February of next year. We're really wrapping up this much larger picture of like what has been our dream over the last like 35, 36 years and what is already over. And so that's going to kind of be, I think, a big part of the decision, the thing we're stepping out to on the 27th, which I think is a Thursday, if I'm not wrong. And it's a choice of what our like emotional truth is. Pisces, moon in Pisces, and making a square to the sun in Sagittarius. Sun in Sagittarius at this time is like, here's my creative freedom, right? Here's my creative freedom. Freedom, Sagittarius, sun is creativity. It's the present moment expression of your own self. It's not even your truth. It's just what you're beaming, what's going on. Okay, let me see. Um, so yeah, and between this time, Venus will also have made a trine to Saturn, which is really nice. There's something that is open, and it's an open opportunity for us to really understand what's been going on with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Venus is openness, and in Scorpio, she's open to the deepest motivating desire. And there's this trine happen, grand trine with all these things. So there's still an opportunity that we're stepping into and that we're very open to right now about like being able to access our deep motivations. And it's probably going to help us understand and make this somewhat difficult decision to step into a more like to share. That's what the first quarter square is about. It's about sharing something somewhat nascent that you've been working on, but it's time. It's time to push it out into the world for the first time. It's kind of like a debut. Um, and with Venus in a trine, making a trine to the in-between place, right? 26 is in between 25 and 29. That's going to be really activating whatever anxiety you've had about finishing up these last, again, 35 years of your life. If you are not 35 years old or older, this is probably somewhat destabilizing. Or, even if you're around that age, it's probably somewhat this is a really serious conjunction that's happening between Saturn and Neptune, and it's incredibly existential. And it feels like a void of nothingness, but it will pass, and we will be creating a new dream by the beginning of February or the end of February of next year. Right now, we're kind of in the fertile soil between the end and the beginning. And it's really major. You can't understate that. It's really major. But I think with Saturn moving direct in the day before, we're going to have a grip on that space in between because Saturn's going to be closing the gap um, now. So, hope that makes sense. It's definitely an opportunity that we have, but it's an opportunity to really, again, step into this void space in a way that actually we want to, because it's Venus. Venus is what we want, and Venus makes space for Scorpio in this case, which is that deep motivation. And I'll tell you that deep motivation over the next several days while Venus is finishing its time in Scorpio, that deep motivation is Pluto in Aquarius, which is social change. Total, total social change that's happening over the next 20 years. This is not an overnight phenomenon, but it's the changes that we are undergoing socially and in our own minds and our own, you know, bodies and intelligence mechanisms. So that is the first quarter square, and I imagine it will feel very empowering because of that Saturn direct. All right. I'm not actually going to talk about this one, the waxing gibbous semi-square. Let's see, though. Interesting that it will be close to Chiron. I'm going to talk about this in the context of the first quarter trine, which I think is, yeah, closer to the 30th of November. This is the first opportunity, the first big opportunity that we have in the lunar cycle. And it's a very hot and fast-moving opportunity. By this time, Mercury is now direct as well. Venus is in a trine to Neptune. There's a lot going on here, a lot of clarity of moving, of like where we were very confused moving forward, even though, like I would say 2 weeks ago, last week, there's been a lot of opportunity that we feel like it is time for us to move into. But I think this space in between Saturn and Neptune is that void that we are probably quite afraid of. It's the void of meaning that I think exists as we're completing this huge cycle and beginning a new one. And it'll be nice and interesting because Venus is still in this trine. We've been working on a lot of deeper psychological openings around the ending that we are in right now and finding opportunities in it. Not only that, but finally, we've gone far enough back in our own inner psychology, rethinking things, reflecting Mercury retrograde in Scorpio about, again, topics like death, sex, money, specifically other people's money, investments, and trust, specifically trust, um, healing very deep-seated betrayals potentially, and just understanding them differently. So by this time, Mercury's direct, so we've done that work and we're moving forward now. And over the next several days, Mercury's going to make that trine again to Saturn, Neptune, and we're going to be filling in the space that we made with Venus making this trine and this opportunity, because that's really making space. Venus is about an opening, it's about making space that allows us to like actually want to take this opportunity. Mercury's going to come in and really fill up the space with some, logical, linear insights and actionables. And the opportunity is in Aries here. It is for the self. It's for the present moment action to know really what, it's not even about knowing. Aries is about being and doing, ruled by Mars. Mars is past its square to the lunar nodes, which is pretty nice by this point. So we've kind of made a decision to let ourselves move in our own uninhibited freedom, which is Sagittarius, but also do that with, every action we're doing so knowing that we need to pay attention to the details. That's this resolution through the South Node in Virgo. We need to pay attention to the details. We need to pay attention to how we're devoting. And so really every action that we're taking from our free will is a devotional one. It is an act of devotion. That's pretty much it. And so truly the opportunity here on this last day, I don't know if it's the last day, but on the 30th of November here, the opportunity is to be emotionally free and unencumbered because you know what your creative truth is. And that creative truth comes through you when you are letting yourself just be who you are emotionally. Okay, so then let's go to the full moon. Again, I'll probably do a full video about this at some point because it is truly pretty wild as a full moon. And that's because the sun and the moon are exactly square the lunar nodes. And I mentioned this briefly just now with Mars because Mars has just made that square to the nodes as well. But when we have the sun and the moon square the nodes, this is also means that we are halfway between the last eclipse season and the upcoming eclipse season. So it's a little bit eclipsy in its own right. But essentially what it feels like, because it's not just one planet squaring the nodes, now we have two. We have the moon in Gemini and the sun in Sagittarius. Basically, this is about a decision that we could really go either way on, because the sun and the moon are both halfway in between the south and the north node, halfway between the past that we're comfortable with, halfway between, same equidistant to the past that we're comfortable with and the future that beckons infinite possibilities. So the past is a little bit detail oriented and the future is very, very vast, very, very delusional. All right, right? That's the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo. So in evolutionary astrology, there is a way to kind of work with this because otherwise it can seem a little silly, right? You're just kind of on a cross, equally strung. It can't win with them, can't win without them. But here's how you do it. There's a resolution node, and that is the node that the planet last touched. And I can tell you that the sun last touched the south node in Virgo. Sequentially, Virgo comes before Sagittarius, and the moon last touched the north node in Pisces. That's because Pisces becomes before Gemini. So here's how to think about it. To have the sun resolve through the south node in Virgo means that our creative freedom wants to devote itself through daily actions. Our creative freedom is actually simply just a container for the divine. That's what Virgo is. It's the altar place. It's the space that you make through discernment. It's the space that you make through your dexterity, right? You create a drawing of the gods, and it is the spaces in between the drawing that allows it to live and breathe and be recognized. Because if it was all just scribble, 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 totally black, there would be no space to see, right? We would just be filled, and that's where the Virgo archetype can become kind of a busybody, can become stuck in tasks and stuck in the conveyor belt of doing things because that's what it thinks it needs to do in order to connect to the divine. But unless it allows itself to be open and a vessel, it will not actually feel as though it is in balance. So that sun, I think, depending on what your, like if you need more structure or less structure in your life, um, you need to figure out. I think this is going to be a full moon where it's going to be very clear for each and every one of us how we're using our mind, which is the Gemini Sag axis, how we're using our mind in service of whatever our truth is. Truth is Pisces, and accessing truth. Communicating with truth is Virgo. Truth is everything, everywhere, all at once. There's nothing that's not truth. But in terms of the human experience and how we navigate it, how we create it from our own personal consciousness. The Virgo is the way that our eyes are looking. It's the things we're pointing at. It's how we are molding and shaping our every moment of reality. Okay. Pisces is indiscriminate. Virgo is discriminate. These are two sides of the same axis. Sagittarius is our right brain. Gemini is our left brain. Okay. So we have all the different ways of thinking and using our minds, our right brain, our left brain, and then the ways that we put our mental energy into things in order to connect. Or it can be the way that we bring inspiration down into materiality. If an artist feels inspired to create a pot, it needs to channel its creative energy to form the vessel, right? So it's never one directional here, but the only way you're going to understand it is directional. So you might spend some time thinking about what is the choice that's being presented to you at this time, because it is a choice. And going back to the resolution nodes, on the other hand, the moon in Gemini will resolve through the north node in Pisces. And so this is one of the more interesting things for me when any planet in Gemini would resolve through, you know, whatever node is in Pisces. Anyway, my point here is the moon in Gemini is feeling safe and secure, and like you want to grow the data that you have in your mind. You want to grow your optionality. That's Gemini. You want to grow the possibilities. You want to grow your own curiosity. The moon is really about that growth. It's what you want to nurture. It's how you also feel really safe and as though you can relax. Evolutionary astrology, also one of my favorite things, is that um, you must rather you can only evolve through the emotional body, and therefore you must be relaxed. Which I need to. My strong Gemini energy will really wind me up sometimes, but um, you need to relax. You need to enjoy whatever's moving through you and allow your nervous system, allow your entire body to take it in. Because if one part of your body is tense and you're trying to run something new in your body, you're not going to have a cohesive experience. And of course, everyone's always moving through different areas of tension in their lives. Everything is dynamic, right? If it wasn't dynamic, we would be dead. We would be static, and therefore we would be dead. But in any case, my point here is Moon in Gemini is about feeling safe through that dynamism, through that communication. You might be having an important conversation about your beliefs at this full moon and how your beliefs actually allow you to devote yourself practically on a day-to-day basis, and therefore actually feel like you can access that flow state, the connection to the divine in Pisces that you know that you are. Or again, it could be the other way around, how your mind and your belief systems open you to inspiration such that you bring that inspiration down and mold physical reality into, the way that it's going to be expressed. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. That's very much so what's going on at this full moon. The moon resolving through North Node in Pisces simply says there are infinite options, there are infinite number of things to think about. And it's about staying open to that, right? It's a strange duality of articulating articulating as much as you want, whatever makes you feel safe, but knowing that the truth is limitless. There isn't an amount of words that you could ever say that will be all of the words. And that at this point, I want to say it should engender a feeling of possibility, emotional possibility, but Saturn is there, Neptune's still there. The way I'm thinking about it makes me even feel a little bit in despair because it's like if we can't access the words that we need to communicate, then how are we ever going to successfully build this life that we want? But again, the sun is on the other side exactly at this point, resolving through that south node, which is saying our creative expression, our honest, authentic creative expression, Sun Sagittarius, wants to resolve through the South Node in Virgo at this time, which is about using our authentic creative expression as a devotional practice. And so the words maybe that we use to express this devotional practice, this creative expression as a devotional practice, there isn't going to be one way to put it. We can put it in literally any way, and it's still is fine. It's still great, but there isn't one way to express our honest emotional truth. But because the sun's there on the other side, this is about like the true expression, a creative expression of our honesty, of our authenticity in every single solar moment that we live. Like I'm really loving this Sag season. I'm like wearing much more bright colors. Whoops. I hope I didn't lose you for too long. Um, here's the days that follow in the new moon, where we have the last quarter trine. And that's going to be between Leo and the Sun in Sagittarius, with Venus also very close, which is very nice. Venus now being in Sagittarius herself, too. All of Sagittarius season ruled by Jupiter in Cancer, by the way, which is very emotionally authentic. We're connected to the truth of our safety, excuse me, of our home, of our desire to nurture ourselves and our lives. But anyway, we've just come off of this full moon. As I said, when the sun was in Sag or is in Sag, we want to creatively actualize our authentic selves. And when the moon is making a trine to that sun, the moon is in Leo. Again, this is another very creative signature. There's a way that we're able to very successfully put ourselves out there into the social realms by this date, December 8th. And it helps us to really go back to that Scorpio intention of returning to some fundamental deep core desire around, again, sex, other people's money, psychic stuff, occult stuff, astrology, anything that is the deepest motivation you can find, right? There's going to be something where we find we can successfully socially integrate, because that's a last quarter trine, successfully socially integrate our creative emotional experience thanks to the freedom with which we are allowing ourselves to express our creativity, to express our truth. That is Sagittarius. So after that, we reach around December 11th, the last quarter square moon, which is about the letting go. It is the first moment where we realize, okay, well, I did most of what I intended, whether I know it or not. Most of what I intended to happen in this moon cycle happened. So what's next? This is the point where you have to make the decision to cut the cord because there's more, right? And it's interesting because this is happening between the moon in Virgo and the sun in Sagittarius. So we're getting more of this interesting full moon theme, I think, that we are just coming off of. The moon will be with the south node in Virgo. And so this is going to be a lot about the truth of the daily actions, which have helped us to work up to this point, this very intellectual cycle, honestly, with that full moon in Gemini. But there's something I think that we are finally seeing very clearly as our day-to-day reality that is something from the past that we've allowed ourselves to reclaim. We're still in the process of reclaiming it as the South Node moves through Virgo. And I think this last quarter square is kind of about, well, I want to say we're thinking of new ways to go about our day-to-day life, but I still think they're going to be somewhat old, um, because the South Node is there. And it's going to be inspired by the fact that we have really loved feeling free and uninhibited. And so maybe we're remembering a time in our lives where we were much more uninhibited than we are now. And we're able to let go of the way that we thought we were reconnecting to our past. I think that's it. I think we're letting go. I think the way I've been working with this is like I've been returning to many of the old ways that well, not that old, but like 5 years ago when I first really was getting very deeply into astrology and spirituality and esoteric philosophy. And my painting practice also, how that showed up for me 5 years ago. I've been trying to bring that back into my life right now because things have really changed over the last several years, in the last 2 years, rather, with Saturn moving through Pisces. Saturn moving through Pisces has very heavily restricted spiritual truth in our lives and really shut some things down, made some things more important than others. And now that the Saturn and Pisces transit is coming to an end, and by the way, here we see that Neptune is direct. When did that happen? Let's double check. Um, yeah, on December, it's frozen on me, but on December, I think it's 10th, we'll have Neptune going direct. And then both of these planets are going to be going direct. And that's crazy. That means that that gap between Saturn and Neptune is only going to be shortening from here on out. But going back to the South Node stuff, um, you know, since June, really, we had Mars on the South Node in Virgo. We were going back to some actions from the past of how we devoted ourselves to the highest truth that we know, to our highest creative potential, which is that North Node in Pisces. And I think we got a lot out of that in June. I know I got a lot out of that, but I was also really returning to some of my painting practices and some of my spiritual practices that I had, quite frankly, abandoned. And now I've brought many of them back into my life, but I'm actually realizing that they need to be updated again. They need to be infused with something probably from even further back in my life when I was even less inhibited. Um, and I see this as true for everyone else. This is that exact last quarter square scenario, where, we're letting go of something in Virgo. We're letting go of the way our lives, our day-to-day lives have been working for us because we see the truth of freedom at this time. And it's interesting because the sun's moving into a square to Saturn. We're going to be coming into some roadblocks here, nothing insurmountable. I love a square, but we're going to be coming into some decisions we need to make around how our freedom is allowing us to express our spiritual authority by early December. And I think this last quarter moon is going to bring us into, we essentially have a bit of a T-square going on with the moon here and Saturn, and that's going to be really serious. It'll be very interesting. On Let's get the exact hour here. It's going to be very interesting when the moon is in late Virgo because it'll be exactly opposite Saturn and Neptune. I is just so curious to be in this time. Also, we see Mercury will move into Sagittarius at this point, which is very interesting. Mercury in Sagittarius is a very fun signature because you have the very right brain, um, place of Sagittarius, and you have Mercury, which is very left brain. So you're trying to mix these two hemispheres. And, it's very poetic. You can be very poetic and it's good sales people. Like you can really convince people of things, but you can also lose the plot really quickly. Anyway, going back to Moon opposing Saturn and Neptune. This is December 11th, a Thursday. This is a tough moment. I wonder if it will feel a little different because both of these planets are direct now. However, that space between Saturn and Neptune is still very, very voidy, very difficult to grasp. So, I do think that them being direct will be very interesting. I think we're going to know, we're going to have a grip over this void in a way we didn't the month before, when they were both retrograde. But again, this just goes back to how we are emotionally allowing ourselves to devote to the higher structures of truth, right? So, very interesting. Mars will also be making a square, an exact square to that same space. And so we are feeling very motivated through our own freedom to get over a block, to get over the final block, really, because this is the last quarter square between Mars and these planets, to let go of the way we thought our freedom meant, like to let go of the way we've been acting in the past, um, and just really, really be free. And there's probably going to be something, a hurdle to jump at this moment, probably a hurdle around our beliefs, our personal belief systems, because that is Sagittarius and how we act out our personal belief systems. All right. So that's that last quarter square. Again, I like it a lot for going back to a very innocent, a much younger, potentially part of us, which felt much less inhibited in or like self-aware even. Self-awareness is amazing. I don't want to say don't have your self-awareness, but I'm saying don't feel guilty about the way that you connect with God, or don't feel guilty about the way that creativity runs in your life. Even if it hasn't fit, you haven't been able to make it work. That's what's happening because the Saturn Neptune, this is a balsamic conjunction, and you're creating space for yourself by continuing to show up in the way that's true for you. This goes back to choice. This goes back to you already knowing you're not here to learn, you are here to be yourself. And yeah, you learn things along the way, but I really, again, would like to reframe this whole life thing away from learning journeys and curriculums. It's a wonderful metaphor, but I think choice. I think that lesson of choice is going to be the big thing that we're learning once Saturn and Neptune go into Aries for good early next year. But okay, let's go into this waning sextile. Well, it's a bit less than a sextile, but by, yeah, the end of this lunar cycle, December 15th, we'll have the moon starting to get very dark while it is in Scorpio. The sun will be at these late degrees of Sagittarius. Mars will have moved into Capricorn. Talk about productive, and Venus is getting very close to the sun. It is getting very close to Mars. There's a tightening in a relationship, very likely. These are the two relationship planets, and how we perceive ourselves. The sun, literally in the middle of a certain relationship. You see how the sun is really in the middle of this relationship. And this dynamic is very important. This is also a balsamic dynamic because Venus is moving faster and as she's coming this way. So there's the completion of a certain relationship cycle that is helping us to be very clear about what our own personal truth is, our own personal creative expression is. And that's coming as a block, as some big choice that we have to make in the face of the end of our dreams. Like the last 35 years of how we make our dreams reality, because that's the Saturn Neptune cycle. There's something about our personal expression, like our expression of our personal beliefs through our day-to-day, through our creativity. There's a relationship that's creating a container here for us to see that very clearly. That's the Venus Mars on the sides of this. At this point, the moon is getting very dark in Scorpio, and so we're going very deep here. Pluto's moving quick. Pluto's already well into 2 degrees here. So things are going to be picked up by mid December. Picked up for sure. I really love Mars and Capricorn for getting things done, for productivity, material productivity. Honest, authentic material productivity ruled by this Saturn in this balsamic direct with Neptune. There's like, we know how to finish this story. Okay, we really know how to finish this story by the end of December, and yet this squares to this place mean there's something about where our beliefs might be getting in our way, and we have to let go, or we have to start opening our brain, opening our space, right? Last quarter square, opening up our space to recognize we've probably been acting too small. We need to we need to put ourselves in a bigger pond, if you will, even if it feels somewhat unknown, somewhat existential, in fact, incredibly unknown, incredibly existential still. We feel the forward momentum moving. I had some strong deja vu when I just said that, just so you know. And what else is happening at this time? Um, yeah, Uranus is pretty deep back into Taurus now, not that much, but 28 degrees. Um, what else? What else? What else? I mean, really here we just have the ending of this lunar cycle, um, and the finishing of this square between the Sun and Saturn Neptune, as well as Venus and Saturn Neptune. And we might as well look at this new moon that's going to complete, excuse me, new moon in Sagittarius, which, by the way, is not only square to the Saturn Neptune balsamic conjunction, but it is also enclosed very tightly by this Venus Mars balsamic conjunction. So there is a relationship here containing this new beginning. It is the completion of a relationship containing this new beginning, and all of this new beginning in Sagittarius and our beliefs, right, is forming a very strong square to the Saturn Neptune balsamic conjunction. There is a belief we have to get over. We kind of have to get over ourselves. Um, and I think we're ready for it. I think we are ready to get over ourselves, but I think this will be an opportunity to jump a barrier. Um, I think it's an opportunity to jump a barrier. It's ruled by, Jupiter still in Cancer, deep emotional, what am I saying? Intuition, yes. Deep emotional wisdom is what is, allowing us to make this jump with this last quarter square. Mercury is squaring the nodes, however, which is very interesting. So at the same time, this square to the nodes just brings us right back into the Virgo. So it's not going to be that challenging to make a decision. We might see many sides, but we are finally aligning our minds to the truth that all these planets have already gone through in their square to the nodes from Sagittarius here. And this is really the last piece of the puzzle as Mercury comes and passes this square to the nodes at this new moon. It says, we know in our minds that we need to go back and just plot our day-to-day moves in a way that actually tracks what we believe in, but it's no longer what we just believe in. It is the edge of what we believe in. It is not even needing to know what's next, but needing to hold space for that bigger pond that we're ready to hop into. I truly think that that might not happen until mid-January when we get the Venus-Mars conjunction happening. That's really the first big new structural thing we're getting. However, this is very important as a part of the journey where we're gaining coherence in our mind, finally. So I really like this new moon. The square does seem like it might be, again, a barrier we need to jump, but that is all squares are. When you feel pressure to move, but it is difficult, do not run away from it. Do not run away from it. It is just something to allow it to push you. And usually I don't like to say that. You don't want to let other people push you around. You don't want to let situations push you around, but that's what a square is. You and trust your inner intuition, trust what you feel safe doing. Jupiter and Cancer, trust what you feel really excited about. And this could just be a fear of your own capacity to believe in yourself in Sagittarius. Maybe you need to go out on a limb, you know? But I really like it. I actually really like the square because I think it's a push. And we need to know what to do with such a strong inner prompting as this, which I think it is a very strong inner prompting. But it is one to do something difficult, which is to, again, this is exactly squaring. Let's see what the exact new moon is, but all of this time, these planets are in between the square. It'll be actually, oops, what am I doing? It'll be pretty close to Neptune, closer to Neptune than to Saturn, but still in the middle of them both. It'll be at, or let's see, yeah, 28 should be, but let's double check. 28 degrees of Sagittarius, which is much closer to Neptune than it is to Saturn. However, still very close to Saturn. But the fact that it's past the square to Saturn means that there's structurally something we've already probably made a decision around. And the new moon, it's time to make that jump around our faith. Like there's something completely intangible that's going to be not just a block towards what we want in this cycle, but actually the exact obstruction that will let us know we're in the right direction. And again, an obstruction in infinite proportion or possibility, which also means that we can respond to it through our own infinite proportion or possibility. Okay. Um, in conjunct Uranus, interesting. Material intelligence has been very important throughout this cycle. Intelligence, Uranus, materiality, Taurus, and so this is what is called a waning inconjunct or a disseminating phase inconjunct, and that's kind of about needing to listen to your external environment to help you adjust what you're going to do. So this is going to be a big cycle of adjustments, and ultimately that's what we are leading up to. Um, at this beginning of this new moon. The new moon in Scorpio becomes the new moon in Sagittarius, and so everything folds into each other. But yeah, I let me know how you're connecting these dots in your brain if it makes sense to you. It certainly makes sense to me. This end of November opportunity that we have is massive, though. So do focus on that. Focus on the opportunity of material intelligence that you have at this time. This new moon opposite Uranus in a grand trine to Jupiter and Saturn. Neptune Saturn trine is when they are both retrograde. So this is a deep pulling back into our own inner psychology. Okay, conjunct Mercury retrograde. This is something from the past coming back up about a deep desire that we have to engage with material intelligence. That is the opposition to Uranus and Taurus. It's all tied in here, people. It's all tied in here. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you have a lovely, lovely cycle. Like I said, I will probably make a full video about the Gemini full moon, but let me know what you think and have a lovely week.